A single name flashed on the giant screen, and for a handful of powerful executives in the audience, the corporate announcement became a moment of pure terror. As the room erupted in applause for their mysterious new CEO, Rachel, Mark, and Julia could only stare in sickening dread. They weren't just looking at their new boss. They were staring at the girl whose life they had systematically destroyed in high school. The woman who walked onto the stage, radiating an aura of untouchable authority, was the same Emily Thompson they had tormented, humiliated, and tried to break. Her presence wasn't a corporate reshuffle, it was a reckoning. In a plush seat near the front, Rachel Collins, Technova's celebrated head of marketing, felt the professionally crafted smile freeze on her lips. The air evacuated her lungs, replaced by a cold, metallic dread. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of panic. It couldn't be. It was impossible. This was that Emily, the mousy, awkward girl she had personally made it her mission to break in high school. The Emily of cafeteria taunts and locker shoves. The Emily whose spirit she had tried to snuff out with relentless, casual cruelty. Yet, the woman on stage was not that girl. This woman was poised, radiating an aura of untouchable authority. Her simple, elegant dress spoke of quiet power, and her eyes, as they swept across the crowd, held a calm, piercing intelligence that Rachel had never seen before. 2 tables away, Mark Peters, a senior project manager known for his backslapping bonhomie and cutthroat ambition, felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. He tugged at the collar of his shirt, which suddenly felt 2 sizes too small. He remembered holding Emily's backpack hostage, scattering its contents across the muddy quad while his friends laughed. He remembered the look in her eyes, not just fear, but a profound, wounded confusion. Now, that same girl, or the ghost of her, stood before him as the ultimate arbiter of his career. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. He exchanged a panicked, wide-eyed glance with Julia Chen, a talented graphic designer sitting a few seats away. Julia's face was ashen. She was a follower, never the ringleader, but her complicity was a lead weight in her stomach. She remembered drawing the cruel caricatures, the ones that had been passed around class, the ones that had made Emily shrink into herself. And she remembered Rachel orchestrating it all. Emily gripped the edges of the lectern, her knuckles white, a tiny, solitary sign of the storm raging beneath her serene exterior. She scanned the sea of faces, strangers, colleagues, and among them, the architects of her teenage misery. Her gaze drifted, almost magnetically, and for a heart-stopping second, her eyes locked with Rachel's. In that fleeting connection, a decade of history flashed between them. Rachel saw not hatred or vengeance in Emily's eyes, but something far more terrifying: indifference. It was the look of someone who had not just overcome her past, but had rendered it irrelevant. Emily smiled, a small, controlled curve of her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice smooth and steady, amplified by the ballroom's perfect acoustics. "I see some familiar faces in the crowd." The statement, innocuous to most, landed like a targeted strike on Rachel, Mark, and Julia. The air grew heavy, charged with unspoken history. The polite applause felt like a death knell. Emily Thompson was no longer the girl they could push around. She was their CEO. She was their boss. And the new era of Technova Corp had just begun. But, to truly understand the chilling gravity of that moment, the sheer, poetic justice of that corporate coronation, we have to journey back. Back to the fluorescent-lit hallways of Northgate High, to a time when Emily Thompson was just a girl with a dream, and her world was about to be systematically torn apart. 15-year-old Emily Thompson lived in a world of logic and order. Her bedroom was a sanctuary of neatly stacked programming manuals and schematics for imaginary gadgets. She came from a simple, loving home. Her father was an electrician who taught her the beauty of a well-wired circuit, and her mother, a librarian, instilled in her a deep love for the structured narratives of classic literature. They were ordinary people who fostered in their daughter an extraordinary mind. Emily's ambition was quiet but fierce. She wanted to build things that mattered, to write code that could solve real-world problems. She entered Northgate High with a bright, hopeful outlook, believing it to be a place of learning and opportunity, a meritocracy where intelligence and hard work would be rewarded. She could not have been more wrong. High school was not a meritocracy, it was a kingdom, and its ruling monarch was Rachel Collins. Rachel was popular, charismatic, and possessed a keen, cruel instinct for social dynamics. She saw in Emily's quiet brilliance and lack of interest in social climbing not a harmless eccentricity, but a silent judgment on her own world of manufactured popularity. Emily's existence was an affront, and Rachel decided to make an example of her. She wasn't alone. Her court included Mark Peters, a jock who translated his physical dominance into social power, and Julia Chen, an artistically gifted but deeply insecure girl who found safety in Rachel's shadow. The bullying began subtly, a forgotten invitation to a group study session. A snide remark about her secondhand clothes whispered just loud enough for her to hear. But it soon escalated into a calculated campaign of psychological torment. It was the daily, grinding erosion of her self-worth. In biology class, Rachel would, accidentally, knock Emily's meticulously organized notes to the floor, scattering them under people's feet. Mark would playfully shoulder-check her in the crowded hallways, sending her books flying. Julia's role was more insidious. She used her talent to create cruel drawings of Emily, exaggerating her features, scribbling hateful words, and circulating them through the school's burgeoning social media networks. Each incident was small enough to be deniable, to be brushed off as a joke or an accident, but together they formed a relentless barrage of humiliation. Emily tried to fight back at first. She reported an incident to a guidance counselor, a weary, overworked woman who offered a pamphlet on conflict resolution and advised her to try to fit in a little more. The advice was as useless as it was insulting. It taught Emily a harsh lesson. No one was coming to save her. She was alone. The isolation was the worst part. She would sit by herself at lunch, pretending to be engrossed in a book, the cacophony of the cafeteria a roaring reminder of her solitude. She saw former friends avert their gazes, afraid of being tainted by association. She was a pariah, a social leper, and Rachel was the one who had branded her. The nadir, the defining moment of her public excruciation, arrived on a cold Tuesday in November during the annual school talent show. For weeks, Emily had practiced. The piano was her one refuge, a place where her fingers could fly across the keys and create a world of harmony and structure that was absent from her daily life. She had chosen a complex and beautiful Chopin nocturne. Her music teacher had encouraged her, telling her it was time to share her gift. For a fleeting moment, Emily had allowed herself to hope. She imagined the applause, the looks of surprise, the possibility of being seen as something more than the school's resident weirdo. She walked onto the stage, the heat of the spotlight blinding her. The murmuring of the crowd was a low growl of anxiety in her ears. She sat at the grand piano, took a deep breath, and opened the sheet music she had placed there an hour earlier. But her Chopin was gone. In its place was one of Julia's hideous caricatures, this one showing her with a pig's snout, sitting at a piano with keys made of garbage. Scrawled across the top in Rachel's looping handwriting were the words, "Emily the Pork Estra." A snicker erupted from the front row, where Rachel and her friends were sitting. It spread like a virus through the auditorium, growing into a wave of cruel, unrestrained laughter. Time seemed to warp. The seconds stretched into an eternity of shame. Emily felt her face burn, a hot flush of humiliation that threatened to consume her. Tears welled, blurring the hateful drawing in front of her. She could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on her, not in admiration, but in mockery. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee the stage and the school and never come back. But then, something else took over, a cold, hard fury, a sudden, defiant clarity. She would not give them this. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She closed her eyes, shutting out the laughing faces and the hateful drawing. She pushed the caricature off the stand, letting it flutter to the floor. In the echoing silence that followed the laughter's peak, she took another, deep, shuddering breath. She thought of her father telling her that the strongest circuits are the ones that can handle a power surge. This was her surge. She placed her fingers on the ivory keys, and she began to play. Not the Chopin she had planned, but a fiery, passionate sonata by Beethoven, one she knew by heart, one filled with rage and sorrow and, ultimately, a defiant triumph. The music poured out of her, a raw, unfiltered torrent of every emotion she had suppressed for months. The complex arpeggios were her arguments, the thunderous chords her fury, the delicate, quiet passages her pain. The auditorium fell silent. The students who had been laughing moments before were now captivated, stunned by the sheer, unexpected power of the performance. They were witnessing not just a display of musical talent, but an act of profound rebellion. Rachel's smirk faltered. Mark stopped laughing. Even they could not deny the beauty and strength of what they were hearing. When the final note faded into the vast, silent hall, Emily didn't wait for applause. She stood up, her back straight, and walked off the stage without looking at a single person. She hadn't won the competition, but as she walked through the empty backstage hallway, a single hot tear of catharsis tracing a path down her cheek, she knew she had won something far more important. She had found a core of internal strength she never knew she possessed. She hadn't just survived her public humiliation. She had transformed it into a source of power. The war for her spirit was over, and she had emerged, scarred but victorious. The aftermath of the talent show was a period of grim, silent resolve. The bullying didn't stop, but it no longer had the same effect. Emily had built a wall inside herself, a fortress of quiet determination. The taunts and shoves still hurt, but they no longer pierced her core. She poured all of her energy, all of her pain and anger, into her academics. Her grades, already excellent, became flawless. She saw her studies not just as a means of learning, but as the blueprint for her escape. Every equation she solved, every line of code she wrote, was a brick in the foundation of a new life, a future built far away from the poisoned ground of Northgate High. It was during this time that two key figures became her lifelines. The first was Mr. Davies, her computer science teacher. He was a kind, observant man with a passion for nurturing raw talent. He saw past Emily's withdrawn demeanor and recognized the brilliant, analytical mind that lay beneath. He noticed her eating lunch alone in his classroom, working on complex coding problems far beyond the curriculum. Instead of pitying her, he challenged her. He gave her university-level textbooks, introduced her to the concept of machine learning, and encouraged her to enter the statewide Innovate the Future competition. "Their words are just noise, Emily," he told her one afternoon, gesturing to the hallway beyond his classroom door. "But this," he tapped a complex algorithm on her screen, "this is a voice. This is a language they can't speak and will never understand. You're not just smart, you have vision. Don't ever let them make you feel small enough to forget that." His belief in her was a steady anchor in the turbulent sea of her adolescence. He became the mentor she desperately needed, the one who taught her to see her intellect not as a source of social alienation, but as her greatest weapon. Her second ally was Liam Carter. Liam was new to the school that year, a quiet, observant boy who sat next to her in chemistry. He was unimpressed by the school's rigid social hierarchy and saw the cruelty directed at Emily for what it was. One day, as Mark tried to trip Emily in the hallway, Liam, without a word, simply stepped in the way, catching her elbow to steady her and giving Mark a look of such cold disappointment that the jock, for once, was taken aback and moved on. After that, a tentative friendship bloomed. Liam didn't press her to talk about the bullying. Instead, he engaged her on her own terms. They talked about science fiction, about the ethics of artificial intelligence, about their shared dream of getting into MIT. He was the first person in a long time who had treated her as an intellectual peer. Their friendship was a quiet space of acceptance and mutual respect. They spent lunches in the library, not hiding, but collaborating, diagramming ideas on napkins, and challenging each other's theories. Liam's steadfast, uncomplicated friendship was a balm on her wounded spirit. He didn't try to fix her or save her. He simply stood with her, reminding her that she wasn't invisible, that she was worthy of friendship and respect. His presence helped her relearn how to trust, a crucial step in her emotional recovery. With Mr. Davies pushing her academically and Liam supporting her emotionally, Emily began to transform. She was no longer just surviving, she was building. She threw herself into her project for the Innovate the Future competition. While her peers were focused on their social lives, Emily was spending her nights and weekends developing a novel encryption algorithm inspired by the patterns of prime numbers in nature. It was complex, elegant, and deeply personal. It was a system for protecting things, for keeping them safe from unwanted intrusion, a digital manifestation of the defenses she had been forced to build around herself. Her pain was no longer just a source of motivation, it was becoming a source of innovation. She was learning to alchemize her suffering into strength, a process that would come to define the rest of her life. The turning point, the moment the trajectory of her life shifted irrevocably, came in the form of a thick, manila envelope that arrived on a Saturday morning in April of her senior year. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside, beneath the letterhead of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, were the words she had barely dared to dream of: "We are pleased to offer you a full academic scholarship." It wasn't just an acceptance letter, it was a validation. It was a declaration that her mind, the very thing that had made her a target at Northgate High, was her most valuable asset. The scholarship meant she wasn't just escaping, she was being chosen. As she showed the letter to her parents, who wept with joy, Emily felt a profound sense of release. The invisible chains of her high school experience shattered. Rachel, Mark, and Julia were no longer her jailers. They were just ghosts she was leaving behind. Her victory was amplified when, 2 weeks later, she won first place in the Innovate the Future competition. Her encryption algorithm was hailed by the judges, a panel of tech executives and university professors, as a work of quiet genius. Standing on the stage to accept her award, she saw Mr. Davies in the audience, beaming with pride. In that moment, she understood what he meant. Her work had a voice, and it was finally being heard. University was a rebirth. Arriving on the sprawling Cambridge campus, Emily felt like she could finally breathe. For the first time, she was not the exception. She was the norm. She was surrounded by thousands of other brilliant, driven, and often socially awkward young people who were passionate about building, creating, and discovering. Her classes were exhilaratingly challenging. Her professors were leaders in their fields, and her classmates were collaborators, not competitors. The intellectual energy of the place was intoxicating. She shed the last vestiges of her high school self like a snakeskin. The shy, withdrawn girl was replaced by a confident, articulate woman. She joined the university's cybersecurity club, where her innovative ideas quickly earned her respect. She no longer sat alone at lunch. She was at the center of boisterous debates about quantum computing and neural networks. Her friendship with Liam, who had also gotten into MIT, deepened. They were each other's touchstones, a constant reminder of how far they had come. An impactful moment of recognition came during her junior year. She took a notoriously difficult seminar on advanced cryptography taught by a legendary professor, Dr. Anya Sharma. The final project was to identify a flaw in an existing, widely used commercial encryption standard. It was considered an almost impossible task. For weeks, Emily immersed herself in the problem, her mind buzzing with a familiar intensity. She filled whiteboards with equations, drank gallons of coffee, and pushed herself to the brink of exhaustion. Then, late one night in the computer lab, she found it. A tiny, elegant, and potentially catastrophic vulnerability. She presented her findings to the class. When she finished, the room was silent. Dr. Sharma, a woman known for her intimidating intellect and sparing praise, stood up and began to applaud. In 20 years of teaching this course, Dr. Sharma announced to the stunned class, "No student has ever accomplished this. Miss Thompson has not just completed an assignment, she has made a genuine contribution to the field." That moment was more validating than any award. It was the ultimate affirmation from a mind she deeply respected. It solidified her newfound confidence and ignited the spark of her entrepreneurial spirit. She wasn't just a student of technology anymore. She was ready to become a creator of it. The girl who was once humiliated for her intelligence was now being celebrated for it on one of the world's biggest academic stages. Emily's journey after graduation was not a simple straight line to the top. It was a grueling climb, marked by the same relentless determination that had defined her academic career. Her first job was a junior programmer position at a mid-tier software company in Silicon Valley. It was a world of cubicles and corporate jargon, a far cry from the intellectual utopia of MIT. She was often the only woman in meetings, her ideas sometimes dismissed or co-opted by male colleagues. But the ghost of Northgate High had forged her into something resilient. She didn't complain. She outworked, outsmarted, and outpersevered everyone around her. Her pivotal moment at that first job came during a company-wide crisis. A major client system had been breached, and the existing security protocols were failing. Panic was setting in. While senior engineers were scrambling and pointing fingers, Emily, the junior programmer, stayed late, fueled by coffee and a cold, analytical fury. She dove into the system's architecture, her mind moving with a speed and clarity that left her colleagues in awe. She remembered the vulnerability she had discovered in Dr. Sharma's class. She suspected a similar flaw. Working for 36 hours straight, she not only identified the breach, but also wrote a complex patch that sealed the vulnerability and restored the system. She didn't ask for permission. She simply solved the problem. Her actions saved the company millions and earned her an immediate promotion and the awed respect of her peers. She continued to climb the corporate ladder, moving to more challenging roles at bigger companies. With each step, she absorbed knowledge, studied leadership, and honed her skills. She learned not just how to code, but how to manage a team, how to navigate a budget, and how to sell a vision. But the corporate world always felt confining. She yearned for the freedom to build something from the ground up, something based on her own principles. The idea that had won her the high school competition, the encryption algorithm inspired by prime numbers, had never left her. She had been refining it in her spare time for years, making it stronger, more elegant, more unbreakable. She knew it had the potential to be revolutionary. 5 years after graduating, she took the biggest leap of her life. She quit her high-paying job, cashed in her savings, and, along with her old friend Liam as her co-founder, started her own company. They called it Aegis, after the mythical shield of the gods. They rented a tiny, windowless office and worked around the clock. The early days were a blur of instant noodles, technical setbacks, and pitching their idea to skeptical venture capitalists who saw two young idealists, not a future industry leader. The struggle was immense, but Emily's leadership was unwavering. She was the architect of the technology and the soul of the company. She fostered a culture of intense collaboration and mutual respect, the exact opposite of the toxic environments she had endured. Their breakthrough came when Aegis was invited to a prestigious cybersecurity conference to demonstrate their technology. They put their system up against a team of elite, white hat hackers, offering a significant prize to anyone who could breach it. For 3 days, the hackers hammered at Aegis, but the system held firm. It was unbreakable. The demonstration created a massive buzz. Suddenly, the venture capitalists who had once dismissed them were calling relentlessly. Aegis secured a major round of funding, and the company's growth became explosive. Their encryption software was adopted by financial institutions, healthcare providers, and government agencies. It was widely hailed as the new gold standard in data security. Within 3 years, Aegis was a dominant force in the industry. It was then that Technova Corp, an older, larger, but less innovative competitor, came calling. Technova's own technology was becoming obsolete, and they saw Aegis as their salvation. They made an offer to acquire the company for a staggering sum. Emily, however, was a shrewd negotiator. She wasn't just interested in the money. She saw an opportunity to implement her vision on a global scale. She countered with a single, audacious demand. She wanted the acquisition to be a merger of equals, and she would be the CEO of the newly combined entity. The Technova board, facing a crisis of relevance, was stunned. But they looked at their declining profits and at the undeniable genius of the Aegis system, and they agreed. The deal was signed, catapulting Emily Thompson from startup founder to the CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation. The girl who had been systematically broken down had methodically built an empire. Back in the Corinthian Hotel ballroom, the formal event was over and the mingling had begun. Emily descended from the stage, not with the triumphant air of a conqueror, but with the calm purpose of a leader ready to get to work. She moved through the crowd, shaking hands, listening intently to introductions, and making a point to remember names. Her confidence was not loud or arrogant. It was a quiet, unshakable force. She projected an aura of competence and grace that both impressed and intimidated the senior staff. The inevitable encounters with her past were handled with surgical precision. Mark Peters, his face a mask of forced joviality, was the first to approach her. "Emily! Wow! Thompson! Unbelievable! It's me, Mark Peters. From Northgate? This is wild," he boomed, extending a hand. Emily took his hand, her grip firm and cool. "Mr. Peters," she said, her voice perfectly even. "Yes, I recall. You're a senior project manager in the Enterprise Solutions division. I've read your team's latest performance report. There are some inefficiencies in the deployment timelines I'd like to discuss with my COO. We'll be setting up divisional reviews next week." She gave him a polite, dismissive nod and moved on, leaving him standing there, his fake smile collapsing, the casual "Mr. Peters" hitting him like a slap. She hadn't acknowledged their shared history. She had reduced him to a line item on a spreadsheet. Her interaction with Julia Chen was different. Julia had been hiding near the back, looking pale and sick. As Emily passed, Julia simply bowed her head, unable to meet her gaze. Emily paused for a moment. "Julia," she said softly, but with an edge of steel. "You're a designer in the marketing department. I reviewed your portfolio during the merger's due diligence. You have a unique style. Very expressive." The word expressive hung in the air, laden with the memory of cruel caricatures. "I expect that talent to be used to build this company up, not tear people down. Is that understood?" Julia looked up, her eyes filled with shame and tears. She could only nod, whispering, "Yes, yes, CEO." The final, most dramatic confrontation was with Rachel. After avoiding her for most of the evening, Rachel finally cornered Emily near the exit, her desperation overriding her fear. "Emily, we need to talk," she said, her voice a strained whisper. Emily turned to face her, her expression unreadable. "Rachel, head of marketing, you have a meeting with me on the calendar for Thursday at 9 a.m. to discuss the Q4 campaign. We can talk then." "No, please," Rachel insisted, her voice cracking. I'm sorry for everything. High school, I was a horrible person. I was insecure and cruel, and I don't know what to say." Emily was silent for a long moment, studying the woman in front of her. The perfectly coiffed hair, the expensive suit, the powerful job title, it was all a facade. And for the first time, Emily could see the terrified, insecure teenager still lurking beneath it all. "You're right," Emily said finally, her voice low and clear. "You were horrible. What you and Mark and Julia did was not just high school stuff. It was cruel. It was damaging. And it's something I had to carry for a very long time." Rachel flinched as if struck. "But," Emily continued, "I will tell you what I told my board when they asked me about leading this company. I don't make business decisions based on emotion. I make them based on performance. Your department's metrics are strong. You are, by all accounts, very good at your job. That is the only reason you and I are having this conversation right now, instead of HR security escorting you out of the building." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to an intense, confidential tone. "So, here's what's going to happen. You are going to go back to your office tomorrow, and you are going to continue to be the best damn head of marketing this company has ever seen. You will report to me. You will meet your targets. You will treat every single one of your subordinates with the respect and dignity that you never showed me. Your redemption will not come from this apology. It will come from your work and your actions from this day forward. Do you understand me?" Rachel, utterly stripped of her power and prestige, could only nod, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she choked out. "Yes. Thank you." "Don't thank me," Emily said, her gaze like ice. "Thank your department's performance analytics." She then turned and walked away, leaving Rachel standing alone in the grand ballroom, a ghost at a feast. finally facing the consequences of a decade-old debt. In the weeks that followed Emily's ascension, a palpable shift occurred within the culture of Technova Corp. The change was driven by Emily's leadership, which was demanding but fair, innovative but ethical. She held town hall meetings where she listened to concerns from employees at every level. She implemented a radical transparency policy regarding company performance and strategy. She established a mentorship program specifically designed to elevate talent from underrepresented groups. The message was clear. At Technova, your value was determined by your contribution and your character, not by your connections or your capacity for political maneuvering. The reactions of her former tormentors were a study in contrasts. For Julia Chen, Emily's words had been a catalyst for profound self-reflection. She threw herself into her work with a newfound sense of purpose. She volunteered to lead the design for the new mentorship program, creating visuals that were inspiring and inclusive. She made a point to be kind and encouraging to the junior designers, offering the support she had once helped deny to Emily. One afternoon, she left an anonymous, handwritten note on Emily's desk. It contained no excuses, only 3 words. I am sorry. It was a small gesture, but a genuine one. Mark Peters, however, struggled mightily. He couldn't reconcile the powerful, respected CEO with the weak, pathetic girl from his memory. He saw her success as a personal affront, a cosmic injustice. He believed she was out to get him, seeing her critiques of his department's inefficiencies not as professional assessments, but as personal attacks. His resentment festered, turning into paranoia. He started making mistakes, missing deadlines, and blaming his team. His performance plummeted. Within 6 months, he was quietly let go, a victim not of Emily's revenge, but of his own inability to adapt to a world where his old high school tactics of bluster and blame no longer worked. The most complex transformation was Rachel's. Emily's ultimatum had shaken her to her core. For the first time, she was forced to confront the ugliness of her past without deflection or excuse. She worked harder than she ever had before, driven by a desperate need to prove herself worthy of the second chance she had been given. She became a different kind of leader. She stopped taking credit for her team's work and started celebrating their successes. She became a fierce advocate for her subordinates, particularly the quiet, brilliant ones who reminded her of Emily. The change culminated in a tense budget meeting. A different department head proposed cutting a promising but early-stage project run by a young, shy female engineer. In the past, Rachel would have seen this as a political opportunity. Instead, she stood up and fiercely defended the project, using her marketing acumen to articulate its long-term potential with a passion and clarity that surprised everyone, including Emily, who was chairing the meeting. Rachel won the argument, and the project was saved. After the meeting, Emily asked Rachel to stay behind. The office was quiet, the city lights twinkling outside the panoramic window. "Why did you do that?" Emily asked, her tone genuinely curious. "That project had no bearing on your department's metrics?" Rachel looked at her boss, her former victim. "Because it was the right thing to do," she said, her voice steady. "Because that young woman, she's brilliant, and she deserved to have someone fight for her." A long silence filled the room. Then, for the first time, Emily gave Rachel a genuine smile. It was small, but it was real. "I agree," she said. "Good work today, Rachel." It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a form of grace. It was an acknowledgement of change, a glimmer of redemption earned, not given. Emily realized that her own personal evolution was not just about her own success, but about her capacity to inspire, or in some cases, force, positive change in others. Her leadership was not just rebuilding a company, it was rebuilding people. Years passed. Technova Corp, under the leadership of Emily Thompson, thrived, becoming a global model for both technological innovation and corporate ethics. The company's culture of empathy and respect became its most celebrated asset, attracting the best and brightest talent from around the world. Emily's story, once a whispered rumor, became an internal legend, a source of inspiration for anyone who had ever felt like an outsider. Emily herself evolved from a brilliant CEO into a true visionary. She never forgot the scars of her past, but they no longer defined her. They were simply a part of her journey, the harsh crucible that had forged her indomitable will and her profound empathy. Her relationship with Liam had blossomed, and they were now partners in life as well as in business, their bond a testament to the healing power of unwavering support. She found peace not by erasing her history, but by owning it, by understanding that her deepest wounds had given her her greatest strengths. The resolution with her past came to a quiet, satisfying closure. Mark Peters faded into obscurity, a footnote in her story. Julia Chen found success as a freelance artist, known for her compassionate and uplifting work. And Rachel Collins, against all odds, became one of Emily's most trusted executives, and eventually, something akin to a friend. Their relationship was never one of easy familiarity. It was built on a foundation of hard-earned respect and a shared understanding of the past. Rachel's redemption was complete, not because Emily had pardoned her, but because she had fundamentally changed who she was. One evening, Emily stood on the balcony of her office, looking out at the sprawling city below. Rachel stood beside her, the two of them reviewing plans for a new philanthropic foundation funded by the company. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that can only exist between two people who have navigated a long and difficult history. "Do you ever think about it?" Rachel asked quietly. "Northgate?" Emily continued, looking at the horizon for a moment before answering. "I don't dwell on it," she said, "but I don't forget it either. It taught me that the worst things that happen to us don't have to be the end of our story. Sometimes they're the beginning." Her story was not a simple tale of karma or revenge. It was a more complex and hopeful narrative about the human capacity for transformation. It was a testament to the idea that resilience is not about avoiding injury, but about how we heal. Emily Thompson, the girl they bullied, did more than just become their CEO. She became a remarkable leader who learned to build a better future, not in spite of her painful past, but because of it, proving that true power lies not in dominance, but in the quiet, unyielding strength of a forgiving and transformed heart.